Okay, well, 9:59 is close enough, and welcome to everyone that's already joined us. Welcome today to the Safety Action webinar. Today's Friday, the 13th of September, and today we're presenting to you about our road safety edition of the newsletter, and your host will be Gary Rowe, supported by myself, Andrea Rowe. Welcome, and Gary, take me to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So we've got lots of driving safety tips to share with you. Firstly, we'll start off, we've got questions of the week. Firstly, are you allowed to drive in bare feet? I've heard that that's a rule. Gary will tell us later on if that's the truth. If you'd like to put your answer, feel free to add your answer into the chat. And our next question is, can you guess the top 5 annoying driving habits? I'd love to hear what annoys you on the road, and please put your comments into the chat there. And again, Gary will tell us the top 5 annoying driving habits later on. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and welcome everyone. Okay, let's kick off. I've got quite a few topics this morning, so I'll go through them, I think, fairly quickly. So let's go bright and breezy, and hopefully you'll pick up some of these that might be both of interest and interesting tips as we go through. The first one, maybe it's my sense of humour. I just found it amusing when I read an article from a journalist, Tom Fraser, in drive.com. You may see they've got a television program called drive.com as well, I think. And he pointed out that we've all observed that over decades, we have noticed that every model car, when the next one comes out, it's a bit bigger than the last one. And you've only got to look back at the original Minis, the original VW Beetles, and the original Toyota Corollas, and look at them today. If you parked one of the early ones beside it, they may be the same shape, but you'll be surprised of just how much bigger they've grown. Of more recent years, we see television screens. Every time you buy a new television set, the screen's got bigger, bigger, bigger. You haven't even had to try and chase a bigger one. Go out and try and buy a small one, you'll actually struggle to actually find a small screen television. So what we've now noticed, though, is that this is now happening, this trend of everything growing larger is also happening inside the vehicle. And so this is what the bit I found amusing from the journalist Tom Fraser, that the screens are getting too big. Now, I'm not sure if the image I've got on screen here now is real or fabricated for the article, but I think this is certainly showing how we're going with the size of screens, and are they going to be distracting for the driver? Absolutely. To get to a lot of features, we've lost knobs and buttons. So we have to push on a touchscreen and go down possibly multiple layers down on a touchscreen, maybe to alter the temperature in the car, and other things that you would want to do whilst you're driving along. So obviously this is just raising the issue. This is our road safety special edition this month, and that these are potentially distracting for the driver, and certainly tempting the driver to play with more options that are available there. So I just thought I'd leave that one there. You and I can't control this directly. We're buying, as you buy new cars, the screens will have got bigger. More of your buttons will have disappeared. You're going to have to use the screens to get to some of the features like climate control inside the car, for example, that you will want to adjust as you're driving along. There could be the radio and other things. So reasonable things that we're normally able to safely adjust are going to take a bit more effort. So I thought I'd just leave that there as a thought. I don't have an answer other than you're going to have to exercise your own, if you like, discipline and self-judgment there as we move forward. Question: how accurate is your speedo? I actually looked this up, and the Australian design rules actually specify it's illegal for vehicle manufacturers to have a speedometer that actually underestimates the speed. So that's illegal. So once it becomes illegal to underestimate on a speedo, manufacturers quite rationally don't want to be prosecuted. So they're going to err on the side of safety for themselves. And virtually every speedometer in every car in Australia overestimates the speed you're doing. If you think you're doing 100 kilometres per hour, you're not. You are not doing 100 kilometres an hour. You could be going as low as 90 kilometres an hour. And so we just did if you like, a bit of a quick straw poll around the cars in our family and related in the business. And I've found, just in my personal experience, a variety of, maybe 20 cars, that what we've found is anywhere between 2 kilometres, which is the lowest I've come across. So you'll be, if you think you're doing 100, you're doing 98, up to 10 kilometres overestimate. So what you'll find is it could be, as I've shown here, you're not doing 110. You're more likely, we think the average is about 5 kilometres per hour overestimate. So you could be going more likely 105, but more, you could be as low as 100 kilometres an hour in 110 kph zone. So all
I
I'm
noticed,
sharing,
Gary, it's harder to
sorry.
check this. It's harder to calibrate your speedo now because in Victoria, I haven't seen recently any of those speed checks that are actually working.
You're right. There's very few of them. Occasionally in side streets, you'll see in 50 and 60k zones, particularly in the 50k zones, the mobile speed sign has a big smiley face if you're doing under the placarded speed. So they will tell you the speed they're doing. I go around on my bicycle and I try and speed up to see if I can get over the speed limit, not to be unsafe, but I can't because I'm on a bicycle, and it has a big smiley face and says you're doing 27 kilometres per hour. And so well done. So I'm on a bicycle. So it's actually calibrating my bicycle speedometer as well, Andrea. So at low speeds, I'll calibrate that. But Andrea, virtually everyone has a smartphone. You can get a free app for GPS on those. So most cars and most smartphones have GPS. They're pretty accurate if you're doing a steady speed. So best to have it on cruise control, best to have it on a fairly flat, wide open road. This is the best time to calibrate it, Andrea. And your GPS will generally give you quite an accurate answer. So that's one way to calibrate your answer. Somebody said something about an electric car. I may have missed that, Andrea. Did you see a note in the chat?
I think Rick suggesting you're riding an electric bike if you can get to the speed limit.
Oh, no, I can't get the speed. I got to 27 kilometres an hour in a 50k zone.
A non-electric bike, right, Gary?
No, I'm just pedaling as hard as I can on a flat to get to about 27. But thanks for checking that. No, I don't have an electric bike yet, but my brother does, and he's encouraged me so I can go longer distance with him. But at the moment, I'll stick to my pedal one. But thanks anyway, Rick. Thanks. Yeah, well done to you too. So what I recommend, Andrew, so you raise a good point. So the tip out of this is I think everyone should calibrate your own speedo, both at 100 kilometres an hour or thereabouts, and possibly at the lower speed as well, because if it overestimates at 10 at 100 kilometres an hour, it will not be 10 over at 60. So probably the 60, we find that the gap, the error grows as you go up in speed. So we think most speedometers are more accurate. They're about right at like 40, 50, 60k. So don't assume you've got a lot of spare margin, but calibrate your own speedometer. As I said, most smartphones, GPS, I think a passenger can hold that so the driver, you can drive safely, drive steady, open area, you can calibrate it. So the other thing about GPS, I found if you're relying on that for speed, as you change speed, it takes them some time to average out the distance you're covering for your speed. So they will not be instantaneously accurate. It's generally when you're traveling at a steady speed. Secondly, they can be affected by foliage hanging over the road, tunnels, bridges, and even in the city, in amongst tall buildings, GPS signals echo off buildings and get conflicted. If you've ever had your GPS maps in and around a built-up area in the city, in the CBD, you might find it's a slightly less accurate. So calibrate your speedo out in the open area. Were there any other questions there, Andrew, before we leave that topic? Your microphone's off, Andrea.
Thanks, Gary. And Carol's reminding us it might be safer to be going a bit slower without realising. And Carol reminds us of the Wipe Off 5 campaign to,
Yeah. The only thing I find, I think that's a good point, Carol, but sometimes I find people out in the right-hand lane, out on an open, safe freeway with multiple lanes, and the person, I think I've calibrated my speedo correct, is they're doing 90 kilometres an hour because their speedo's probably overestimates by 5, then they wipe off 5 and they're doing 90 in the right-hand lane and they think they're okay. It's okay if you're in the left-hand lane, broadly speaking. So
that might be one of the annoying habits that we've got some comments in there telling us about annoying habits, including going too slow in the right-hand lane.
Yeah, a prize for those who can not only pick the top 5, but actually get them in the right order as well. So there we go. Thanks, Andrea. So just something to look for. So our next question, occasionally people raise different questions to me, and I think some time ago, Andrea, in our newsletter, we commented on, can you park on the nature strip? And I don't know if people can remember the answer to that. And generally speaking, in the Australian design rules, it says no, but it is left it for every council to decide what they're going to do within their council. So it's parking on nature strips is basically driven by councils, and therefore, if there's no signage and you're not obstructing the footpath and the road, most councils will tolerate parking, particularly if you're on your own nature strip and you're not actually annoying neighbours and parking a truck on their nature strip, for example. So let's come to parking in a bike lane. This one is actually a bit difficult. I like to be definitive when I do research and give you a yes/no answer. So I apologise for this one that I'm just not able to do that directly, but I'll tell you what's involved. For a start, even if you look at the images that are on screen now, you'll notice that there's 2 distinct types. So one is clear, 2, the top and the right, are clearly placarded as a bicycle lane. And the one in the bottom left is a truck obstructing partially a bicycle lane. So it's obviously a delivery truck. In a lot of areas I see, the lane that you might see in the top and the right-hand side, the bicycle symbol is a lot smaller and out to the right-hand edge. And there's generally enough room for the car and a bike to remain in that lane. So when we answer this question, it depends a lot upon the line marking and the size of the lane and where it is in the orientation. And then it's got worse. Every single state of Australia has slightly different rules. Can you believe it? Every single state has a slightly different answer for parking in bike lanes. So if I can just quickly summarise for you, public transport, and this includes taxis, etc., and obviously buses, can stop in bike lanes, even as fully placarded as a bike lane, to pick up and drop off people. You and I can reasonably drive up to about 50 metres because you're entering or leaving a property to get in or out of that property, and it could be over a bike lane. You can park adjacent to a bike lane, but the bottom left shows, but you shouldn't be so large that you're obstructing the actual bike lane. And all of this applies assuming there's no signage to the contrary. So if you have signage contrary to what I've just told you, the council may have overridden and just said no parking here or whatever they may have. So I apologise I can't give you a one-off definitive answer, but there's at least the guidance on it. This next topic is not about road safety, but I found it really interesting. And so I'll just give you a bit of a brief background. So what happened recently is that in the Science Museum, or one of those in Canberra, a student used the supplied hand sanitizer in the Science Museum and was actually playing with an exhibit, which they're meant to, because it's an exploratory type of museum where you're meant to touch, feel, and play with exhibits. And it was the plasma globe. I don't know if if you've seen the big, large globes with the looks like lightning arcs and things inside and sparks. And it ignited his hand sanitizer, and he sustained burns to his hands. And so the Safety Authority in ACT, which is the Commonwealth sector, Comcare, we have called WorkSafe in every other jurisdiction. So it's Comcare for federal jurisdiction, is prosecuting the Science Museum. They haven't been to court yet. They will be soon. We'll update you. But here's my point. During COVID, not only was it mandated that we had to have hand sanitizer, the health department insisted that it be alcohol based and at least 70% alcohol. That's a flammable liquid. And so nobody appeared to question the fact that we've now got a flammable liquid and lots of it in and around our business, that we're dispensing it freely. We've got it on our hands. We may be doing other jobs like a welder in a workshop and many other locations. And so apparently this has not been the only case of where I think hand sanitizer has exploded inside a car. It obviously overheated, and presumably there was some ignition source as well. And some other cases of people sustaining burns. And I think, Andrew, you reminded me this is also a designated dangerous good. So we've got dangerous goods storage and handling regulations to these products.
Oh, correct. And so some businesses, if you buy a big box of this, you, depending on the quantity, you might actually need, like a flammable liquids cabinet to safely store this. And some businesses I know that, even have like pallets of this, and then it actually requires the business to display things like placarding and include them in the manifest as well.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks, Andrea. So I guess my point is, not only a few short years ago, we were mandated to have this. No one appeared to question it. I'm not aware of any people that overtly did a separate risk assessment about this, because even if your risk assessment said, no, this is dangerous, we shouldn't have it, it was mandated by the health regulations during COVID. So you didn't have a choice. So now COVID's ended. Now we've got organisations being prosecuted because they did have alcohol-based hand sanitizer. So what's alleged in court, it hasn't got to court, but in the charges, they've outlined what the Science Museum should have done. One, they could have got rid of the plasma globe, which is a bit boring because they're trying to have exciting things in there. Two, only a trained staff member to actually touch it. Or three, provide a hand soap wash basin at the plasma globe. And using non-flammable sanitizer. So now an organisation that's not been announced openly that this is dangerous and we should get rid of it, but WorkSafe is now starting to prosecute if indeed there's an incident, and they're alleging that this was unsafe and you shouldn't have had it. So I'm only pointing out, it's interesting, as life changes, what we're not getting is full announcement that something has changed. That is, COVID's ended, you are mandated to have this then. Now you better do a risk assessment and decide, is that safe and how you're handling it and for the circumstances. So a non-road safety one, although some have exploded in cars as well. So let's look at tyres. And it's been asked, do they have an expiry date? So once again, I've looked this up, and there is no prescribed expiry date of tyres according to regulation. So there is no legal requirement to dispose of a tyre purely by age. However, if you can see on the right-hand images here, clearly worn below the wear marks, or cuts, tears, are in poor condition, rubber deteriorates with age, even if you're not using it. So you can have full tread, and if it's a very old tyre, the rubber will have dried out and degraded. And so manufacturers recommend, irrespective of condition, even if you've got good, what looks like good tread and no visible cuts or cracks in the tyres, so that they look roadworthy, that you dispose of them after 10 years. And so if you want to know the age of your tyre, so maybe after this webinar, you can go out and have a look at your car. On every car, after the dot designation on your tyre, you'll see a 4-digit code. And I've noticed some of the newer tyres are going to a 6-digit code, but the principle remains the same. What you'll see is the first two in this image is the week of the year, so the 16th week of the year 2012 for the one on the image shown here. This is more than 10 years old. Manufacturers recommend you replace it irrespective of condition. So there you go, 10 years. You can look at your tyres, you'll know, but your car service people will know that and see that as well, and will recommend it to you. Most people wear their tyres out. If you're using it's a daily driver car, you'll actually wear your tyres out probably short of 10 years in any event. But for those who have vehicles that maybe the weekend car only, this could be a circumstance. There we go. Next question. Is there a minimum age limit before young, let's say children or young teenagers, to use the petrol pumps? And once again, I've had a quick look. I can't find any regulations pertaining to this, although the petrol companies or fuel companies refer to regulations, but I can't find them. So I don't think it's actually a regulation, but we've found at least 2 major fuel companies in Australia on their own website, and they vary a little bit, but they either say 15 or 16 years of age. So I think, Andrea, you've got 2 children under that age. I know at least one of them's
yeah, my 11-year-old believes he is old enough to help fill the car, but the signs at the petrol station say differently.
Okay, do they actually have a sign? Do they? I haven't noticed that.
Yeah, I noticed the BP near you. I actually noticed it yesterday. Actually says you must be 16 years old to fill the fuel. Yeah. But I can also share that in the dangerous goods regulations in Victoria, you have to be 18 years old to actually sell dangerous goods, which would include petrol.
Okay, so that's the selling and the working.
So to work at the petrol station, you need to be 18 years old.
Okay, and generally we only want to hire adults as well in the workplace these days, so that would fit. Yeah, I think the real value of this question isn't the age. We know that sometimes either into containers, as shown on a couple of the images here, or even into cars, there are fires and explosions at fuel stations. And from what we can tell, it is not mobile phones, but it is the clothing, particularly nylon type and loose clothing, and people get back in and out of the car during refilling, and it's static electricity. So I think as long as people are properly trained and they know what that static electricity risk is, and the fire and explosion risk is more important than age. However, you'll have to satisfy the fuel companies. They've got the right to placard and enforce their own company rules, as you do within your company. All I want to point out to you in this segment, I think it's more important about understanding static electricity is the key fire explosion risk. So what's wrong with the middle photo is the containers that chap is filling are all still on the vehicle. So they're potentially insulated, they're not earthed. If they've built up static electricity, and by the way, all flowing hydrocarbons, which is petrol, includes petrol, all flowing hydrocarbons generate static electricity. Not that they do generate static electricity. So every one of those containers there rattling around as the car's been going along, sloshing around, has generated static electricity in the container. It's only a matter of luck or bad luck whether it's generated enough static electricity the moment you put the nozzle near the container to start filling it, whether there's a spark and whether that has a mixture rich enough in the air-fuel ratio. I don't know if you know the correct air-fuel ratio in cars. The explosion for normal petrol is 14 to 1, 14 air to 1 fuel. And so a lot of this is the temperature of the day, the humidity, and so the weather, whether there's high wind or not, to reduce the vapor concentration in the immediate area. So safest thing is put your containers on the ground. That will tend to earth them, and make sure the nozzle's in contact with the container before you start flowing, and keep it in contact so you can't have the gap for the spark to jump over. So that's just a little tip around there. So we need to comply with the company fuel company rules. So now you know it's 16. You can tell Thomas that, Andrea.
He won't like that. He's got a while to wait then.
Unfortunately, he does, but we'll give him some other tasks. Okay, driver fatigue. We all know heavy vehicles, particularly interstate truck drivers, B-double drivers, etc. They're covered by chain of responsibility laws. What I found interesting about this one was, and I don't know if you know, a heavy vehicle is prescribed as a vehicle above 4.5 tonnes. So it's not ambiguous. We're either is covered by COR, chain of responsibility, heavy vehicles only. So they have to be above 4.5 tonnes. So what about everything else less than that? We've got trade trucks, delivery vans, all sorts of things less than 4.5 tonnes, but people could be driving long distance, working long hours. They could be tired. They could have an illness that makes them more tired. They could be on medication that makes them more tired or susceptible to sleep or falling asleep. So a logistics company has been charged after their delivery driver, it appears, was fatigued and tired, was 12 hours into a shift, and that may be quite acceptable. I think a lot of, I don't know, Amazon delivery drivers and Uber drivers and everything, I'm not sure everyone's controlling directly how many hours. I think they're independent contractors, and they may or may not be monitored accurately. So yeah, I'm hearing here sales representative, thanks Michelle, could be travelling long hours. We have a duty of care. So let's be clear, even if it's not under chain of responsibility, we've got under all workplace safety laws a duty of care, and we have to have a safe system. So the essence of this one is your company needs to at least have a policy for anywhere you have the potential for people who are driving long distance, long hours, and you may or may not know, you may have to ask them to self-assess, and if they're tired, to stop. If they're tired, don't drive home. Stay in a hotel or something for the night, or have a few hours rest and then drive home, or drive with 2 people so you can share the driving. So there's a number of things you can do, but just have a company policy, be aware of what your staff are doing, and obviously you can't know what they're doing in the car. You can't know their own pure personal health unless it's overt to you, but you can certainly make inquiries, have a policy, and tell them what you expect of them. And that will minimize the risk. I don't think we can eliminate it, but we have that duty of care. That's even under 4.5 tonnes. So don't think fatigue driving charges are only against major trucking companies. So it's lower than that.
Gary, I just shared in the chat there a media release that just came from the Australian Institute of Health and Safety this morning, reminding drivers that roads are workplaces, and just reminding all of us that to be mindful of more heavy vehicles on the road during the school holidays.
Okay. Thanks for that, Andrew. That's a good tip as well. Thank you for that.
But also, the data from Safe Work Australia shows us that, road accidents appear to be, the #1 cause of fatalities in work-related fatalities too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that will probably lead on to this next little subtopic, roadside dangers. Last month, we issued a safety bulletin to our retainer clients following a case in Queensland where 2 qualified diesel mechanics went out to recover a bus that broke down on the road. That's not unreasonable. You need to do this. We've got to recover the bus. They actually got it going and moved it onto a less busy road, but it was still a 100-kilometre-hour zone area, and a drug-affected driver ran across the centre line into the bus and killed both diesel mechanics. This was a terrible, tragic accident. And we know the drug affected driver is the key person. That person is drug affected, driving a car, and also then lost control. And the loss of that control caused the double fatality. However, the company for the diesel mechanics has also been charged with a general duty of care breach as well as reckless endangerment. So here's the point for everyone. If you've got staff travelling in the course of employment, including sales reps, delivery drivers, whatever, you need a company policy. What do you do if you have a flat tyre? What do you do if the car breaks down? And number one is you're not going to work where you are on the road or in the vicinity of a road where there's passing traffic. I think that's what you need to understand. So you need to just think this through. Look at our newsletter article and it'll give a bit more detail, but just you need a company policy to tell, otherwise your staff will get out. So I tried to change the tyre, or they will try and change the tyre and they could be struck. So, and if you are going to do it, where and how are you going to do it? And what equipment have you got? Do you have witches hats? Do you have high-vis vest in every vehicle so they can do that? I think it's Germany and France. It's a legal requirement to have high visibility vest in the vehicle, as well as the accident triangle, I think is Germany, for example. So tragic accident. However, this is not a unique accident. This is continuing to happen every year. People being struck by passing vehicles. They're out on stepping on the road or near the road as near passing vehicles. So please keep that one in mind as part of your company efforts for road safety as well. Now we're up to our half hour, and I'll just try, as I did say, we're ambitious. Let's see if we can get through it. Runaway forklift fatality. So a company has been charged Section 32, reckless endangerment and breach of duty of care, and also the forklift operator. Apparently, the forklift operator got off a forklift, which was parked on a slope. It then rolled away silently, rolled down the hill and struck and crushed and killed a delivery driver who had nothing to do with the forklift, happened to be performing a task with his back to that, and the forklift rolled silently down the hill and killed him. So this comes back, how do we park vehicles? Now this could apply, this is a forklift in this case, but it actually could be your vehicle. And it could be someone in your family. Have they parked the vehicle correctly so it won't roll away? So the things that the court case outlined as what the driver could have done and should have done is, number one, parked it on a flat area. And if you can't do that, they said, well, what you should have done is you should have parked it horizontal to the slope and lowered the tines. And I believe the tines were slightly up in this case of this accident. Turn the wheel so that if it does roll, it will not roll down the hill, but will actually roll side onto the slope. You not only got to apply the handbrake, you've got to check it's actually working to see if the vehicle will move, and if needed, put a chock behind the wheel. So they outlined to the court 5 things that driver could have done, and the driver failed to do that and has been prosecuted. So I want to get to the survey and share that with you. So there's the key points that the court outlined that could have been done. I saw a report from Euro NCAP, that's the European Safety Testing and Rating Organisation. And what they've pointed out is that heavy vehicles increase crash severity, I do apologise. So these are mainly the larger SUVs, sports utility vehicles, and electric vehicles. And what they've actually pointed out is that in the last 11 crash testing they did, only 3 of the vehicles weighed less than 2 tonnes. I'll repeat that. Of 11 vehicles the last 11 vehicles they tested, only 3 weighed less than 2 tonnes. When I started driving, every car didn't weigh any more than about 1 tonne. 1 tonne. So now the majority of vehicles are over 2 tonnes. This is larger SUVs and electric vehicles, and the heavy batteries are causing this. And the real risk is when the heavier vehicles actually collide with pedestrians or with smaller, lighter vehicles. Obviously, the lighter vehicle comes off second best typically.
Yeah, Gary,
So,
little while ago, I read statistics that, the four-wheel drive was 11 times more likely to cause a fatality if it hit a pedestrian to a regular sized sedan.
Okay, that's an interesting statistic as well, Andrew. So thanks for that. Once again, you and I think many of us like bigger, higher vehicles, particularly if we've got a young family to carry them around and we can see over vehicles because we're higher. So we understand all the desire, and I think a lot of the modern vehicles have become more fuel efficient, for example, and environmentally friendly, but there's that risk. So just bear that in mind as part of your road safety and driving. So, are these SUVs too big for the bays? Have a look at the images. One of these photographs I took, the top right, in our underground car park here, but the one I should have taken a photograph of stuck out twice as far as that, yet its rear wheels was against the concrete barrier. So this is not uncommon. Almost everywhere, go into any shopping centre today, a supermarket, shopping centre, car park, and have a look around. And what's worse, you'll see in the bottom right-hand one, not only is it overhanging and possibly overhanging into the disabled bay, have a look, an extra foot hanging out is the tow bars. And I think that a lot of the drivers just don't realise they're hard to see. These are actually a major risk. And so Australian standards have increased in the standard for new parking bays that are being designed and built. It's not a legal requirement, but it's best practice recommended. They've moved the length of the bay from 5.4 metres to 5.6. Guess what? It's not enough. It's not going to fit even 5.6. The new length of bays is not enough for the vehicles you see in this image, in these images here. So I think I think the size of the vehicle and the number of large vehicles is growing. We seem to have a huge appetite for these giant utilities, and the Ram vehicles and what is it, the Ford Lightning. These are bigger than the normal Ford Ranger Utes and the Toyota Hilux Utes. So I'd share with you, the standards recognise, cars are growing, we better increase the standard. I'm sorry, 200 mil longer is not going to actually fit all, and they haven't spoken about the width. And you and I have trouble opening our doors, so they haven't picked up on that point for us. I am mindful of time. If you can spare a few more minutes, folks. No electric cars. A UK hospital banned electric vehicles from their underground car park. And you can see the sign on the right, no electric vehicles. And the father complained he was dropping off his son for medical treatment at the hospital. He was very annoyed. Apparently the background to it was the Merseyside Fire and Rescue Department mandated the ban until the hospital upgraded their fire sprinkler system. So it's not a permanent ban. It's actually through risk assessment that they've recognised the risk and putting everyone else at risk. If any one of those electric cars catches fire for whatever reason, they're going to put a lot of people and the hospital at risk. So it's a temporary ban until they fix that. Apologies, the slide here is a bit mixed up. I also came across an article in South Korea has banned electric vehicles charged more than 90% from any underground car park. So this followed an electric car experienced a fire in an underground car park. It damaged the apartment block on top of it and destroyed 200 cars. 200 cars were destroyed in one fire in underground car park. So their reaction was, let's ban electric vehicles charged more than 90%. They're not going to be able to measure that, and even the driver may or may not know at that exact moment. But experts say that the level of charge in a lithium battery is not the predominant predictor of a fire. So South Korea has reacted to it, but the experts are saying it's an overreaction with the wrong criteria. So maybe they should do what the UK is doing, is rather let's upgrade our sprinkler system so we can cope with any type of reasonably forecast fire. So let's come to our question of the week and our survey. Are you allowed to drive in bare feet? What did you think, Andrea? What did you heard?
Well, I've heard people say that you're not allowed to, but I actually thought that there was, my feeling is that there's not a restriction.
Yeah. Okay. The answer is, and because you've all heard the same thing, so the answer is yes and no. So let's get it clear. So I'm just hearing a few things here. Yes, yes, and I've heard a couple of no's. The answer is, and this is from the Victoria Police, yes, you can drive, but here's the proviso: as long as you have control of the vehicle. So if there is an accident and they allege that it was you're in bare feet and and you didn't have right grip, your foot slipped off the brake onto the accelerator or something of that nature, and it's the bare feet that caused it, then that will be the allegation. So if you've heard yes, or if you've heard no, the answer is same response to wear thongs. The police would say, as long as you have control of the vehicle, you have choice of your footwear.
Actually, this is exactly what Deb said to us in the comments when you first posed the question. So well done, Deb. Spot on.
Yeah. So I think you'll find it's really about control of the vehicle, which I think is correct. But if they're by the way, I would not drive a car in thongs. I prefer not to drive in bare feet, and I actually even have a pair of driving shoes, which are fireproof. And I jokingly tell my family, well, if we have a fire, at least my feet will be okay. But they're thin and have good grip, so they're actually designed.
I would be more concerned about wearing, the thongs sometimes that might slip off or something like that than the bare feet.
That's it. So let's come to the annoying driving habits. Now, the first list I'm going to give you is Safety Action's in-house survey. And by the way, what I realised, it depends what type of driving you've got in your mind. If you're thinking of driving out the Monash Freeway or some other freeway, you're talking about freeway driving. If you're driving on the highway to Ballarat or Geelong, that could be a bit different. And driving in around the city streets. So bear with me if your thoughts are different. It's probably because you have a different environment in mind. So let me share with you, largely led by myself, Gary Rowe, and the team. Number one, driving slowly in the right lane. And by the way, Andrew, I think this matches other surveys we've seen. This is not unique to us. I think it is the most common. If you ask people what annoys you with driving habits, and people say people who drive slowly in the right lane. No one minds people driving slow, but could you just get out of the way and don't try and dictate whether we're speeding or not? Remember, I've told you earlier, when other slow drivers think they're doing the right thing in the right-hand lane, they're not, for two reasons. One, they're not doing 100 kilometres an hour. Two, which is posted and it may be safe. Three, they're just not being courteous. And in fact, the law says above 80k zones, you're not to drive in the right-hand lane unless you're overtaking anyway. So they're actually breaking the law as well. So here's our pick: not using blinkers or too late. I find with great amusement, I can tell what they're doing before they turn the blinker on. So now the blinker is useless. They're halfway around the corner and they turn on the right or left-hand blinker. Well, that didn't help anyone. A vehicle speed up when they get to the overtaking lane. Have you actually noticed that? You're actually driving behind a slow vehicle, you get to the overtaking lane, you pull out to beside them, and they've sped up. And I've actually noticed this many, many times. And I'm just wondering, what is it about us? Because I don't think they're bad people. I'm just wondering, what is it that there's this subconscious movement to just go a little bit faster when you get to the overtaking lane? One I found, and bear with me, I'm out on my bicycle having a ride around most days when it's not raining, and I find the car in front puts on the left blinker. So I say, oh, great. So I can go out to the right, and as it goes around to the left, I'll still be able to keep riding my bicycle. And what I find is they swerve at the last moment rapidly to the right and then turn left, and vice versa when they're turning right. I have noticed only of recent years this bad habit of swerving wide to make turns instead of holding tight to the left. If I'm turning left, I hold tight in the left of the lane and turn left so cars can safely go to the right of me, for example. 5, slowing down to change lanes or exit from a freeway. So what we find is a lot of unnecessary congestion is drivers, oh, I need to change lane. So they slow down, slow down, slow down. They're waiting for a gap. What they should have done is put their blinker on and gently accelerate, and people will, almost everyone will let you in. But they're waiting for a gap. So now they're holding up the people in the lane they're in, and also the people have to slow down for the lane they're entering. So they've now held up a minimum of 2 lanes. And I've seen some people do this from the right-hand lane on the freeway. They see their exit, they're cutting across 3 lanes, making all 3 lanes slow down as they cut across slowly, slowly, slowly to get across. So, and of course, the answer is put your blinker on early, leave it on, and then accelerate gently. I didn't say speed, accelerate gently into gaps, into gaps, into gaps, and leave. Having said that, I've got eBay did a survey. They came up with driving slowly in the right lane was #1. So this is tends to be universal. I'll just quickly say some. We'll finish off today. No parking not parking within the parking bay lines. I think we've touched on that with big vehicles. High beam light, glaring people. Drivers taking your spot when you've indicated. I can assume the person means they put their blinker on in a supermarket car park to turn left into the bay, but someone coming the other way darts into it in front of them. So yeah, that could be annoying. Not putting the headlights on when it's dim light or raining. So we should do this now. I think if you go back 30 years ago, people say it's still daytime. It's not time for lights yet. Loud exhausts, probably mostly motorbikes, but there are some cars that are noisy. People, I've got here approaching roundabouts. Thank you for that. Yeah, it hasn't come up on my list, but yes, it is one of the ones. People don't know how to use roundabouts here in Australia anymore. Playing music too loud, backseat drivers, and somebody said cringy bumper stickers. It wasn't high on my list, certainly not for road safety, but that's what some people are interested in. So sorry we've gone over time, Andrea, and viewers, but hopefully you've got some tips and maybe of some interest as well. So thank you for that, and I'll hand back to Andrea.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you found this webinar interesting. Thanks as always for your participation and your support. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on Friday, the 11th of October.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone. Bye.